You are stretching every dollar at the grocery store and want to know exactly how much will load to your SNAP card this month, whether income thresholds have shifted, which deductions can lift your benefit, and when each change truly takes effect. The federal numbers for fiscal year 2025 are now set, and they come alongside a significant rule on how states calculate utility allowances, including recognition of basic internet costs. This report consolidates what USDA and state agencies have announced, with a focus on maximum allotments, income eligibility, allowable deductions, implementation timelines, and what these decisions mean for low-income households, older adults, people with disabilities, families with children, and part-time workers. The current picture starts with the annual cost of living adjustment for fiscal year 2025 that the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food and Nutrition Service released on August 2, 2024. That notice established the benefit framework that runs from October 1, 2024 through September 30, 2025. In late September and early October, several states issued their own guidance confirming the new amounts and the start date. In parallel, a final rule published in the Federal Register on November 18, 2024, standardizes how states compute the standard utility allowance for heating and cooling expenses, adds basic internet costs to allowable housing expenses, and requires states to refresh their utility cost data on a regular schedule. The rule carries a legal effective date of January 17, 2025, and a compliance date for states of October 1, 2025. Against persistent food price pressure, this topic is particularly urgent for recipients. Public broadcasting coverage on May 26, 2024, examined why SNAP benefits, even with annual adjustments, have not kept pace with grocery costs in many counties, framing the real-world stakes for households that depend on monthly benefits. On the legal framework and responsible agencies, all core figures originate with the Department of Agriculture through the Food and Nutrition Service. On August 2, 2024, the agency issued the fiscal year 2025 Cost of Living Memo signed by the Acting Director of the Program Development Division. That same day, FNS posted an online overview page for fiscal year 2025, linking to detailed tables. On October 1, 2024, two technical PDFs set out the fiscal year 2025 maximum allotments and deductions and the income eligibility standards. On November 18, 2024, the final rule on standard utility allowances appeared in the Federal Register with an effective date of January 17, 2025 and a compliance date of October 1, 2025. At the state level, Louisiana's Department of Children and Family Services on September 30, 2024, confirmed the new maximums beginning October 1. New Mexico's Human Services Department on September 18, 2024, issued a detailed flyer listing eligibility thresholds, benefit levels, and deductions used for the fiscal year. Separately, on September 9, 2024, FNS posted income standards for the Disaster SNAP program for use after declared disasters, distinct from the regular program. The federal materials define the fiscal year 2025 benefit amounts now in force. For the 48 states and the District of Columbia, the maximum monthly allotment is $975 for a household of 4 and $292 for a single person. Alaska's maximums vary by 3 regions, and a 4-person household in the urban region receives $1,258. In Hawaii, the 4-person maximum is $1,723. Guam and the U.S. Virgin Islands have their own maximums consistent with local food price patterns. The memo confirms the minimum benefit remains $23. The deductions table shows the standard deduction rises with household size, with $204 for households of 1 to 3, $217 for 4, $254 for 5, and $291 for 6 or more. The cap on the excess shelter deduction is $712 for the 48 states and the District of Columbia, and the homeless shelter deduction is $190.30. Resource limits are $3,000 for most households and $4,500 for households with an older adult or a person with a disability. The income eligibility table dated October 1, 2024 sets the monthly thresholds as percentages of the federal poverty guidelines. In the 48 states and the District of Columbia, net income at 100% of poverty is $1,255 for a one-person household and $2,600 for a four-person household. Gross income at 130% of poverty is $1,632 for a one-person household and $3,380 for a four-person household. For households with an older adult or a person with a disability who may be tested on a separate standard, the threshold is 165% of poverty, which equals $2,071 for one person and $4,290 for four people. Alaska, Hawaii, Guam, and the U.S. Virgin Islands have separate tables reflecting higher local living costs in line with the pattern already visible in maximum allotments. One policy change stands out in the Federal Register rule issued on November 18, 2024. The rule requires states to standardize how they calculate the heating and cooling standard utility allowance, to update the underlying cost data at least every 5 years, and to include basic internet as part of allowable housing expenses. The agency estimates that about 29% of households will see benefits rise by around 6% on average, roughly $15 a month, while about 5% will see a small decrease of roughly $7. The agency projects a net nationwide increase in total transfers of about 1.3%. The rule's legal effective date is January 17, 2025, and a compliance date for states of October 1, 2025. Against persistent food price pressure, this topic is particularly urgent for recipients. Public broadcasting coverage on May 26, 2024, examined why SNAP benefits, even with annual adjustments, have not kept pace with grocery costs in many counties, framing the real-world stakes for households that depend on monthly benefits. Meanwhile, the utility allowance rule seeks to narrow state-by-state differences and to recognize that basic internet access is an essential cost for work, school, and access to services, a change that could matter for households with high utility burdens and connectivity needs. The documented debate in these materials runs on two tracks. First, the federal notices and state publications confirm that the fiscal year 2025 framework raises several items, including maximum allotments in some jurisdictions and the cap on the excess shelter deduction to better reflect inflation and utility costs. Second, the broadcast analysis emphasizes that even with annual adjustments, benefits may not fully cover grocery costs in many places, inviting close monitoring of real-world outcomes during the year. Both strands were publicly released on the dates noted above and together argue for tracking not only nominal amounts, but also effective purchasing power in local markets. The impacts for recipients can be read by group. Low-income households in general are already seeing the new maximums since October 1, 2024. Households with an older adult or a person with a disability should note the separate 165% poverty threshold and the higher $4,500 resource limit. Families with children often face heavy housing and utility costs, so the $712 cap on the excess shelter deduction may be important now, and the inclusion of basic internet under the standardized utility allowance, beginning with the compliance date next year, is poised to add an allowable cost category. Part-time workers should compare their gross income to the 130% threshold and apply the standard deduction for their household size when estimating benefits. The calendar ahead is straightforward. All maximum allotments, income thresholds, and deductions for fiscal year 2025 took effect on October 1, 2024, and run through September 30, 2025. The utility allowance rule is legally effective on January 17, 2025, and requires state compliance by October 1, 2025, which means its practical effects will be fully reflected in the next fiscal year's calculations. The disaster SNAP income standards posted on September 9, 2024 are available for states to use after declared disasters and do not change regular SNAP eligibility. At the state level, the Louisiana and New Mexico publications show that local agencies have aligned with the federal timetable, so recipients should follow notices from their own state agency for month-by-month issuance details. In sum, fiscal year 2025 brings a continued cost of living adjustment with clear figures for maximum allotments, income standards, and deductions, along with a policy step to standardize utility allowances and to treat basic internet as an allowable housing cost starting with the next compliance date. What bears watching is the purchasing power of benefits in a volatile food price environment, as highlighted by public broadcasting, and the way states update their utility allowance methodologies under the new rule to ensure consistency and equity. For recipients, the most practical steps are to confirm the published amounts and thresholds, estimate benefits using current income and deductions, and track the effective dates so the full set of favorable changes can be realized in the current fiscal year and the one that follows.